Welcome to the Model Resolutions first part of the series, the local church resolutions series. Just really glad you're all here. Let me check my schedule and see what we're doing next. So I want to turn it over to Kathy Velasquez Eberhardt, who is going to be offering a introduction to what is the United Methodist Creation Justice Movement. So go ahead, Kathy.
Hey, folks, super glad to have you all on today. It was fun to see such a flurry of folks jumping in and to see some familiar faces, but also maybe most excitingly, folks I don't know yet, and that is really fun. Those of us, this growing and emerging creation justice movement within the United Methodist Church has been recognizing the call on our lives to work in building creation justice for our planet, within our church, within our denomination. And it's present at the individual level, in our local churches, within our annual conferences, and in our boards and agencies. And we're all, as we have come together in asking these questions, have been asking particularly what more might we do together as people of faith, as a church, as a denomination. And so one of the ways that emerged was through a variety of work teams. Some of you are familiar with them and are participating in them, but we have work teams on worship, on promoting communications channels, on developing materials for annual conferences. And it's particularly the annual conference organizing team that have created this series on and this work of model resolutions. This conversation reminded me that this movement in many ways emerged at the 2018 Creation Justice Summit that some of you were at, but maybe many of you were not. But the theme of that was actually talking a lot about the beautiful words that the United Methodist Church has. We actually do have a lot of great words on the books about creation justice. And our challenge at that summit was to say, how could we put those words into action? How might we close the gap between what we say and what we do? And clearly, there's more work that can be done. There's more words that need to be approved and committed to, commitments to be made. And that's what these resolutions represent. New ideas, but also kind of new commitment to existing ideas. Now, we also know that those beautiful words are aspirational, as are these model resolutions. So even if they were adopted fully, that would still just be a beginning. And that's exciting because the creation justice movement stands ready really to support all of us in figuring out how to put these new words into action. And we welcome all of you to that good work as we dig into these ideas and words and commit to them. So we're glad you're here to share these opportunities and these ideas. If you're not already connected to the creation justice movement, you probably are if you found out about this, but if by some chance you're not, or you know other folks who aren't, feel free to get to our website and sign up for our newsletters, check out the action teams, see if there's anything you'd like to get involved with, or if there's a work team that doesn't yet exist, let us know. We'll help get it started. I think that's all I'm going to say. You'll hear lots more about what's emerging at this moment, but I'm going to turn it back to you, Rishinda.
Awesome. Thank you, Kathy. All right. And I want to introduce the folks who you'll be hearing from today. Of course, Kathy Velasquez Eberhardt, she just shared about United Methodist Creation Justice Movement. She is a commissioned United Methodist Earthkeeper and has been working through she has worked with the Land Stewardship Project in support of sustainable agriculture and served 7 years on the board of Minnesota Interfaith Power and Light, as well as being a founding member and lead organizer for this movement. So we're so glad she's here. Also joining us is Karen McElfish, and she is an United Methodist Earthkeeper, and her home conference is the Virginia Conference, where she has several leadership roles, including the Northern Virginia District Lay Leader, member of the United Women in Faiths Program Advisory Group, chair of the annual conference organizing team for the United Methodist Creation Justice Movement, member of the Virginia Conference Creation Justice Team, and co-chair for the conference legislative network. Also here is Kim Richmond. She is also a United Methodist Earthkeeper. You'll hear a theme with that. She started the Creation Care Ministry in her home church in Maple Springs, in Winston-Salem, and is active in the Western North Carolina Conference Creation Care Ministry, serving currently as the convener, which is a coordinator for that team. She's also a climate reality project leader and the advocacy chairperson for her local Abaddon chapter. And also Reverend Jonathan Brake. So Reverend Jonathan Brake is an ordained elder in the Western North Carolina Conference, where he has served as a pastor in small and large, rural and urban congregations. He is also a Earthkeeper and has also been active in the beginning of the Creation Justice movement, serving on the coordinating communications and loving people and planet teams. So he has worked extensively at the intersection of creation justice for the local church, and is currently on staff of the UMC General Board of Global Ministries as the new program manager for environmental sustainability. And in this role, he now leads the Global Ministries Earthkeeper program, which he is once trained as in the Creation Justice Network. So that is a lot. And some of our titles in the United Methodist Church are chewy, but it helps orient us where we are, where we came from, how we are connected to each other. And that, of course, is the most wonderful thing. So my name is Reverend Mershenda Fairhurst. Sometimes I forget to say who I am, which I think is a little dizzying for some. I am ordained in the Pacific Northwest Annual Conference, and I serve with a small nonprofit, Circle Faith Future, and just ecstatic to have found the United Methodist Creation Justice movement. So for today, our nutshell of what we're going to be doing today is the presentations will focus on 3 resolutions that will describe and invite creation caring and just actions by the local church. And to talk more about that and focus that first resolution for today, I want to invite Karen McElfish to share with us.
Thanks, Rashenda. So I grew up the daughter of an environmental geographer. So he came at it from the science end of things. And we did a lot of hiking and a lot of being outdoors. And that was just a wonderful way to grow up. I grew up in California, so we could spend a lot of our time outdoors much of the year. I married an environmental lawyer. And so my adult life has been steeped in environmental action and regulations and mitigation and throw out all the words. And yet it wasn't until the administration, the Trump administration, pulled us out of the Paris Climate Accord that I found myself sitting at the dinner table, tears rolling down my face, apologizing to my daughter that we were leaving her with a horrible mess. And it struck me that I needed to do something. I needed to be active in some way. Now, our church has a green team. Our church has, in fact, had a green team since 2009. And we give out, LED bulbs, and we sold LED Christmas lights at the Mission Fair. And we have covers on our light switches, and we've gotten rid of all of the styrofoam and so on and so forth. So we'd done a lot of stuff, but it just didn't seem to be enough. And in 2018, when we had the summit in Nashville, at that point, there were a few of us that gathered to talk about how we could help annual conferences in organizing their creation care teams. And that kind of started it. It's been a little bit slow growing initially, but it's really begun to snowball. And it's been so exciting to work with so many people on this effort. We've gone from a few annual conference creation care teams meeting and talking occasionally about what we were doing and so on, to having now developed jurisdictional meetings in all 5 of the jurisdictions for annual conference teams to share information. It's a wonderful way how the United Methodist Church is so connected. But it struck us as an annual conference organizing team that we really needed to take it another step. And so a few of us gathered together to start talking about some model resolutions that United Methodists could bring to their annual conference to encourage and strengthen more creation care or green teams, especially at the local level, because that's where it's got to happen. It's got to happen at home and in our community, at our church. So the first one we worked on was the green team formation, and that is a resolution that, for those of you who've had a chance to look at the website, you'll see actually has sort of two versions to it. All the same information is in both versions, but one version has the resolution, the be it resolved section first, and the other resolution form, model B, if you will, has the whereas first. But the information you'll find there is that we want to encourage all local churches to develop green teams that model a number of practices within the year. We want them obviously to raise creation care in worship, modeling how important it is from a theological basis, from a Wesleyan tradition basis, from a reason basis, and from an experience basis. Does that sound familiar? Our quadrilateral? But that all of these factors play in how we look at our discipleship role in creation care and how best to raise that initially in worship. Hear it in prayers, hear it in litany, hear it in our sermons. And then education. So whether it's participating in the Loving People and Planet program that you heard several of us have been involved in, which is now through Discipleship Ministries and available, or having informal Bible studies, whatever means to do to raise the education on creation care to our adults, to our youth, and to our children. Putting creation care into practice. And for those of you who've had a chance to look at the model resolution, if you haven't yet, I encourage you to do so. You'll find actually several pages worth of things that churches could do, examples of practice. You'll find actually also on worship and education as well, but things like stopping use of styrofoam or encouraging meatless meals for potlucks, or using Chris Zinkowitz's creation care tips that come out monthly through the Creation Justice Movement. And I have to stop and acknowledge that Chris was key in writing this resolution with me, but was not able to join us today. And Kim will raise also that she was key in helping write the land use resolution as well. But look for her monthly tips. They're great ways that you can incorporate that information at your church, local church level. So all of these are possibilities. And then finally, advocacy, because we can do a lot in the way of charity. We can do a lot of hands-on mission work, but we are not going to transform the world without advocacy. So what that might mean would be testifying at the local, state, or national level, being in regular communication with your legislators, letting them know that creation care is important. And I think in a way this recommending using a model resolution like the Green Team resolution at the annual conference is also advocating, because here we're advocating within our own community of bringing more churches to the table, if you will, bringing more churches involved in having green teams. The resolutions also include some recommendations for tools, the SMARTY goals, if you will, specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, time-limited, inclusive, and equitable as tools to looking at your plan. Is this going to meet these, and is it going to be something that you can measure and can track your progress on? So that information is also available just to simply help. So I'm going to stop there because you're going to hear more from Kim, and then we'll have plenty of time, I think, for questions at the end. And so, Rashenda, I'm going to turn it back to you.
Okay, wonderful. And thank you, Karin. And we're going to have time for questions and answers, of course, and just really appreciate Karin, you bringing this to us. As this is how we get started. Here's some ideas for how we interact as a local church and build green teams around that. So it's my turn to share. I was a support writer on the partnerships resolution, and I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. This resolution is called the Encourage Just Partnerships with Local and State Environmental Justice Organizations for Environmentally Just Outcomes. And well, let's go back up real quick because I want to mention the lead author is Elke Vega, Economic and Environmental Justice Lead for the United Women in Faith. And I got to add the whereas parts, so trying to help us teach and learn about why it's important. So this is a quote from scripture, Philippians, don't do anything for selfish purposes, but with humility, think of others as better than yourselves. Instead of each person watching out for their own good, watch out for what is better for others. And you might wonder, well, what has that got to do with a partnerships resolution? Or you might already know that's pretty quick. I'm going to give us the text of the resolution, which can be a little boring. So I've made it more exciting with green font going to be showing up. But basically what we're talking about is that local churches are going to expand the faithful work of stewardship and building relationships outside our local churches to hear new stories of people impacted by degradation of the planet and resources, to learn new practices of environmental justice, and to better understand the expertise developed by those with lived experience of environmental harms. So this is something that many of our churches already do, strengthening the connection between UMC entities, ecumenical and interfaith coalitions, as well as global partners. So why do we need to kind of say specifically as a resolution in our local conferences that we need this kind of partnership work? And we could maybe learn about whose stories are missing from our tables. So 62%, now this is based in a 2014 study, so this is a little data, but it's going to be still pretty darn close. 62% of our denomination attendees and members are over 50 years old. Only 9% of us are under 29 years old. And so, we can imagine how younger folks under 30 might feel impacted by the climate crisis. And 94% of us are white. Now, we've made some good progress here, but there's still a lot of us who have that white perspective in the church, which is great, right? I'm a person, but it may not be everything, right? There may be things I can learn. 91% of us are third generation immigrants or higher, which means that only 4% of us are first generation immigrants and another 4% second generation immigrants. So there's really not a lot of, in our circles, at our tables, at our potlucks, conversation around what it might be like to be an immigrant. 78% of us have an annual income of over $30,000, which I know can be hard to make rent at $30,000 a year. It's still middle class. And we have much fewer of us who are lower class or poor. And 24% of us are parents with young children. Now, I don't know if they counted that in pairs, in which case we're talking about maybe 12% of families. Right? Because parents are generally in twos. But that's again, this seems to be missing from our tables. And clergy elders, this shows up again in our who's coming forward to lead the church, who's being ordained into elders. And we're at a 35-year elders under 35 years being ordained is at an all-time low. And it actually in 2021 was seen as a total of 6% of our clergy and elders were under 35. which is really, again, that question of whose stories are we hearing? Are we getting to hear the stories of folks that are not like us? So, who's missing? Immigrants, the financially struggling, young parents, Black, Indigenous, Asian, Latino, a lot of people. And what we're missing from them is their stories, their gifts, the benefit of their experiences and their expertise. They may have already encountered issues we are only just learning about. And listening to them, letting them lead, partnering with their leadership, partnering with them in their communities is a great way to begin to build those relationships and hear those stories. So why does it matter for climate justice? Well, here we go with this is a quoted in the resolution is the most severe harms from climate change fall disproportionately on underserved communities. So people who are poor, people who don't have mobility to move to a place where there isn't a freeway being built next to you, and that racial and ethnic minority communities are particularly vulnerable to climate change. And we know that most of us know that globally, but it's actually true here in the US as well. So here we go again with the green text. So we are asking with this resolution for local churches to prioritize local and state partnerships led by Black, Indigenous, people of color, women, and youth, and those serving low-income populations, that we can come together in humility to learn together, building on the principles of justice and solidarity for the good of all. So we are going to get there, and the way to do that is together. United Methodist Partnerships are already local, global, and faithful. Look at all the things we do. I mean, I thought I would make a list, and instead there's so many in so many directions. Our boards, our agencies, our local churches, our districts, our denominations, our jurisdictions are already working with disaster relief, working with food banks, working with Indigenous people, working with immigration and immigrant communities, really seeking to be part of the solution, working in poverty ministries. And we know we can't do that by ourselves, and partnering with people who have the experience, who are coming together with us and bringing our faith and voice to that's so much a part of me. I can't imagine letting it go. So we are doing this. We can do this. So get wisdom, get understanding. The local community is where the church is founded, and the range of connection is unlimited. And that's my share for you today. So I'm going to stop sharing, and I am going to take a breath, because that is a I care about that. I care about us. I care about what we do together. And I want to invite Kim to share next, and she's going to be sharing about church lands. And I am going to be sharing my screen again to share her presentation. Kim, just let me know when you're ready for me to share. Is that a yes? Okay, here we go. I'm going to mute myself.
That's great. Thank you, Rashenda. Before I start talking about my church land use resolution that I did, I do want to give credit to Chris Sikowitz, who isn't here today. As Karin had mentioned, she is a fellow Earthkeeper. She is active, very active in the United Methodist Creation Justice Movement, and she had a long career as an editor at the UM Publishing House. So I just wanted to mention those things for her, since she's not here. And when we were preparing for this information session, Rashenda said, why don't you include your why for why you did this resolution? Why didn't you just walk away, not worry about it? And I really had to think about that some, because I have no exposure to working with resolutions. I'm a layperson, and I'm recently new to the conference ministry team. I have never presented a resolution, and this year will be my first exposure to that. And so when they asked if anyone would like to help write a resolution on church land use, I just felt called to raise my hand, because as Rashenda was saying right then, this is something that's very important to me. It is something about which I'm very passionate. Once I became aware a few years ago of the climate crisis and the extinction crisis, and the current degraded state of the environment, and the fact that all of that is primarily not every bit, but primarily caused by humans, I was pretty devastated at the time. I have 3 children who now are 20. My son is 20 and our daughters are 21. And so this is something that's very personal when I start thinking about what their lives are going to be like in the future. So I started doing a lot of reading and a lot of research to learn more about the problem and to see if there was any hope out there. And through all of this, I became aware that we humans can be the good news in this story. We really can, because we have been the big contributors to these problems. We can be a huge part of the solution. But we have to act now if we're going to do that. And that's what this resolution basically tells. It lays out that story that I felt and that was very personal to me. So as Karen had mentioned with the Green Team Formation Resolution, this model resolution comes in 2 different options, and it's really just a matter of format. One thing that I don't know that we've mentioned so far is these are designed as model resolutions. They are there for you to take, look at, and then decide how you would like to tailor them, if at all, to your personal situation in your annual conference. For example, in our conference, in the Western North Carolina Conference, we are going to introduce the Green Team Formation resolution that Karen spoke about. But we have always referred to things in our conference as creation care. And so we changed the title and made it Creation Care Ministry Formation. And then we changed the 4 points that they have in there to 5 points, because we have a plan that mentions 5 points that we could already refer them to. So when you look at these model resolutions, please look at them as something that you can change to fit your personal situation. So anyhow, we also have the 2 options that are available, and the option that I'm going to focus on, just to kind of make it clear, but it's in both options, is that the resolution begins with a blend of scripture and science, basically summarizing what life-promoting and life-sustaining, intimately interconnected features and systems and cycles that God gave us here on earth. And then it goes along with what we have learned, the science, that these features and systems and cycles actually do, and how they work together in harmony to promote and sustain life. And so it starts out describing how the blessings that we've received, the way they're supposed to work. Then it progresses to where creation currently stands. It mentions the extinction crisis. It mentions the climate crisis, the degradation of our environment, of our creation at this point. And, it references basically that humans are no longer working together in harmony with creation to make it work the way that it is supposed to. Once again, that's really where we can find the good news in the face of this problem. Because if we've created the problem or greatly contributed to the problem, then we can be a big part of the solution. If this was something outside of our control, there may not be much that we can do. But since we have caused it, we can fix it, at least help fix it. So then the next portion of the resolution offers basically the hope through action portion that talks about how we can renew these systems through our actions, through our choices. You'll see in the media that these things that are mentioned in here for church land use are often referred to as nature-based solutions. I like to think of them as creation-based solutions. And they provide, by planting trees, by doing many of the things that are described in here, planting gardens, replacing non-natives or invasives with native plantings, and on and on. It mentions many things that churches can do that provide benefit to these cycles and systems that God created. It shows that they basically can work together if we don't just have a lawn that doesn't promote life or doesn't help with water flow or absorption. And it shows the benefits to creation, but it also shows the benefits to humans that you derive from having creation work the way that it was designed to work. In addition to engaging in these acts of hope and renewal that we describe in here, and obviously churches can choose whichever they want to do or come up with others that they would like to do that aren't even listed there. But there are also, once you start to change the look of your churchyard or your church land, it can be an outward and visible sign to the community that you do care about the blessings that God has given us. And if you choose to include edibles and different things in your plantings that can then go to like a food pantry. We have a food pantry at my home church. If you use those to feed the community or those in need, then it is that sign that you are actually engaging in these acts of justice, food justice, to help the people in the communities who need that the most. And so that's really the flow of the model resolution for church land use. It is something that you can read through and we can answer some of the questions here. You can reach out to us later, but I think that pretty much describes it overall. I went on to the internet and just Googled a few United Methodist churches to show you and give you an idea of some of the things that are going on. And I know there are many, many others. I didn't want to, we aren't trying to exhaust all of the possibilities, but just give an example of some of them. And Rashenda, this will be with the first slide. Start small and grow. Literally, I mean, this is a picture of the native dogwood that we planted at my home church the day that we launched our Creation Care Ministry. And I took this photo 2 or 3 days ago, and it is thriving, even though it's a little crooked. We aren't going to worry about that. There was no way we could get that to stand up straight. That was in 2018, Earth Day, Sunday, 2018. So then I looked in I had seen this at another presentation I was doing. And in that same year, July of 2018, the UM News posted that the United Methodist Church in Liberia was targeting planting 250,000 trees. So there's, lots of room between those two markers, 1 tree and 250,000 trees, where any church who wants to engage can take where they are right now and get started. So you don't have to plant the 250,000 trees all at once. You can start with 1 and grow. Can we see the next slide, please? So here is St. Matthew's United Methodist Church in Greensboro, North Carolina. And Carla Burton, who is a member of this church, is also a member of our Creation Care Ministry team for the conference. And this is the garden at their church. And they started small, and they have a small space in their yard. I've gone over and visited it, but they find room to grow. The picture on the right-hand side is where they're adding more beds and doing more things. And they provide the produce from their garden to those in need. And I know that each year they're planting a little bit of extra ways. They also do cut flowers that they take for some shut-ins and some different things. So that's one example. The next. This is First United Methodist Church in Millville, New Jersey. And I liked this one because they took a lot and built a rain garden. You can see the before and the after photos. I went into their website. I referenced where I found these pictures, but they made a point that they said that they developed a place for them to congregate, as well as promote the infiltration of the storm water while supporting pollinators. So they took away some hard surfaces, and you can see the total difference between the new rain garden, pollinator garden, life-giving area that they created that is just beautiful. And they said, I think it will catch 92,000 gallons of stormwater and it will filter out pollutants. And so you can do something small and beautiful like this that will help creation, not only the pollinators, the insects, the birds, but it will also clean the water as it goes through and flows to your watersheds. So this is another example. This is from Franklin First United Methodist Church in Franklin, Tennessee. And they have, once again, I just popped onto their website, and they have the Giving Garden. They started that in 2009 as a small pumpkin patch, and it's now grown into a 5-acre operation that produces a wide variety of produce, and it's managed only by some staff and some volunteers. No, it says it's managed and staffed only by volunteers. So that's all a volunteer. Since 2010, each year they distribute more than 40,000 pounds or 20 tons of produce. And then they also do flower arrangements from their flower and herb gardens. So there is an example of a small pumpkin patch to a 5-acre feeding garden. The next slide, please. This is from Shelton United Methodist.
I think Franklin also has some fruit trees, if I'm not mistaken.
Do they? That's great. Yeah, like I said, I found what I could on the internet, and I've heard of the Giving Garden, and I know it's quite an operation. Thanks, Mel. Okay, on Shelton UMC in Shelton, Washington, they are part of the Orchard Alliance at Shelton United Methodist Church, and this is from their Facebook page that they posted, and they're a community partnership between their membership and other individuals in their community. Once again, what Rashinda was talking about with your just partnerships. They've engaged the community in this, and they care about making a positive impact in the face of climate change. And they are focusing their skills and things on permaculture, edible landscapes, and supporting pollinators. They had a number of beautiful pictures. These were the ones I just captured for purposes of this example. And they said that they are promoting remembering how to feed ourselves and our neighbors and planting hope for the future. That's that hope through action, and just partnerships, everything all included in one. And there's their site on Facebook. And then I think this is our next slide is our last slide. And these photographs are courtesy of Rashinda, who took them in 2019 when she got to visit Methodist Theological School in Ohio. And they created a 10-acre farm out of their 80-acre campus. They founded it in 2013. And I loved their motto that I found on their website. It was theology, ecology, good food for all. And they said that their mission is to teach small-scale farming and produce good food for all in pursuit of a just, sustainable, and generative world. So those are but a few examples, a quick Google search on the internet that brought up some of these, but they are just an example, depending on the size of your churchyard, the size of your property, what you have available, and where your heart lies. There are many different options available. So I think I'll turn this back over to Rashinda, and thank you for your attention.
Oh, that's wonderful. So many pictures too. The possibilities just bubble up, and I just couldn't be more glad for that. I need to close this down for myself. Whoops. There we go. Okay, so the next person we're going to hear from is Reverend Jonathan Brake. And I introduced him earlier, but he is extensive experience, and also going to speak a little bit to, how do we do this annual conference thing with, here we've got some good resolutions, here we care about climate care, creation care, climate justice, however, whatever your context are more comfortable with or used to hearing. Jonathan, share with us kind of your ideas, expertise, and what you wanted to share today.
Thanks, Rashinda, and for all the input we received so far. So as was stated, I am a clergy person. I'm a pastor. I've been to annual conference, I don't know, probably 25 times now. And year after year, I would sit there listening to these petitions come forward on all kinds of different issues and needs, and thinking we really need to have some petitions that have to do with some resolutions and direction that we as the annual conference can take, and the United Methodist Church can take on creation care, creation justice, and the like. And so when this idea came across with our United Methodist Creation Justice movement to develop some examples and to put these out and make them available for you, I believe the link has been placed in the chat where you can go on their website and find a listing of a number of different resolutions. This is a model to begin working with and tweaking and making it fit your annual conference. But where do these come from is going to be important to know as well. Most annual conferences follow a pretty normal, typical set of ways of presenting and bringing a resolution, as we call it, to the floor of the annual conference to be considered and to be voted upon. And usually one person or one church or one creation care team or a group of people can come together and draft and create a resolution that can then be sent to your annual conference. And one of the things I think Kim mentioned earlier, being a sponsor for some of those that are coming to our annual conference, she and I are both in the Western North Carolina Conference. We are going to be presenting 2 resolutions this year, and there's a process by which you have to go about getting those onto the floor of the annual conference. And so typically there will be a due date for your annual conference. Many of those annual conference due dates are around April 1st, which is what ours is, but check with your annual conference to find out if that date has already passed or if it's still possible for you to get one or more of these resolutions onto the floor of your annual conference. And there's usually a link, a way to submit that through your annual conference website. And then they're going to want to know who is sponsoring this, just like a bill in Congress would have to have a sponsor. And so who is sponsoring this? Is it an individual? Is it a congregation? Is it a creation care team? Is it your annual conference creation care team? Those are going to be important information to go forth because they have to know who to get in touch with if there are questions, if there are clarifications, if there are things to put together. So the models that we have put together for you to consider are designed in typical formats. They're different in every annual conference. So find out what your annual conference requires. And they usually have some information giving kind of the background of why we're bringing forth this legislation. And those are usually in a whereas format, whereas this is the case, and whereas that is the case. Therefore, we want to present an action step to take in response to the reality on the ground. And so there will be resolutions at the bottom, be it resolved that we do this or we do that. And each of these points, you can have one point, you can have many points. But when you get to annual conference, it would require someone who is a member of your annual conference, an elected delegate, if you will, clergy or laity, to stand up and present this petition on the floor of your gathered assembly. Now, it would typically be printed in the program, the booklet that is given out to everyone, or it may be an online document that you can access. And so you don't read the whole thing through, but it's presented and then you can speak to it as the sponsor. Here is where it came from. This is why we're bringing it up. This is why it's important. And this is why I urge you, our annual conference, to not only consider, but to pass this resolution. Now, this is all a part of what we as United Methodists call the holy conferencing, but we've made it very formalized in our annual conferences these days. And so the petition will be put before the annual conference. And then typically, if you're following Robert's Rules of Order, which I think most of our annual conferences do, you will have the floor open for people to speak in favor or against the particular petition. And in the midst of all of that, someone may want to offer an amendment to the petition to change some of the wording or add another phrase or something along those lines. There are a number of different things that can happen. But in the process, the hope is we come out with a piece of legislation that can then be passed and adopted by your annual conference to encourage and support your local churches in one of these ways that whatever the resolution has put forward. It sounds like a long process, and it can be. It sounds kind of tedious, and it can be. However, the end result is we move forward as a church in a direction that we have got to go. This morning, as I was getting ready, having breakfast, I was checking the news, and I noticed that the IPCC report came out today and basically says, we've got to make a difference and a change now, right now. We cannot wait any longer to keep carbon emissions below 1.5 degrees increase in global warming from pre-industrial times. And so what they were saying was the timeline is so short that before the IPCC can put out their next report in 2030, it'll be too late for us to make the changes that we need to make now. And so as United Methodists who love and care about God's creation and the injustices that are caused by the destruction of creation, it is now time for us to put these petitions forward and help people understand that this is a part of God's call for us to care for our creation. And some of the ways we do it are formal, like we do at annual conference with the petitions. And so we just want to encourage you to gather around you a group of people to help you make this happen. There are a lot of different ways to do that. In fact, here in our conference, Kim and I were on email this morning, passing information back and forth. We have just released or just sending out to everybody who's on our Conference Creation Care Ministry email list, an email that says, we want you to help sponsor these 2 petitions we're putting forward for annual conference this year. Would you please sign your name on to show your encouragement and your support from all across our annual conference? So we'll have names and churches and cities listed from all across annual conference saying we are in support of these petitions. So when it comes to annual conference and is presented before people, you see this consensus of support and encouragement and excitement around what needs to take place because there's no time to waste. So that just kind of gives you an idea of where things are going. And then on top of the actual petitions, you can have ways to encourage through Facebook pages leading up to annual conference. If your creation care team for the conference has a booth where you set up and have information, you can have flyers and things to give out, QR codes to go to web pages with more information. You can have gatherings there at your booth at certain times where you can share with people verbally why this is important and help encourage their participation. And just find ways to make people aware of the urgency of what we're trying to do and help to push that forward. So I just want to encourage you to make that a possibility for your annual conference. Rashinda, back to you.
Awesome. That's wonderful. I had me thinking too. Now, Kim Richmond and I are both also trained with Climate Reality Project. And one of the things is they have chapters in most states and would be thrilled to come and offer verbally, in person or virtually, maybe a little bit of information about what's going to happen in your state, what's going to happen in your community. You know, is your coastline going to sink into the sea? Which sadly is going to happen in places. Are you dealing with fires like me in Oregon, where literally I've been in my car desperately trying to figure out how to get the family together because we are fleeing a fire zone. So how do we do that together? Mel, I see your hand. Give me just 1 second because I definitely want to get to you. Also, the teaching tools, some of these model resolutions do have a lot of extra material. It's not just the Be It Resolved. And it's because we know that we are all still learning together. I have so much to learn about this. And I'm learning all the time from people and really appreciate those parts where I can say, hey, how is someone else coming to this? Wow, I didn't know that. And help us gain a shared language in the United Methodist Church to talk about this and help us learn together. Even if it's too late to submit your model resolution, the work you do this year to prime that pump so there is fresh, clean water coming out for your resolution next year, that is really important work too. So yes, absolutely. Go ahead, Mel.
Just wanted to make everyone aware that the Climate Reality Project, I'm also Climate Reality leader, and we have a faith-based working group in the Dallas chapter, but they have really placed an emphasis in the global Climate Reality Project on faith-based partnerships. And Rachel Scott is the person who heads that up, if anybody is interested in that information.
I guess Mel just handed me this softball plug. So I run the Climate Cafe Multi-Faith, and that meets on 2 Tuesdays a month. And we are doing this in partnership with Rachel Scott, the Climate Speakers Network at Climate Reality Project. They are super supportive, just like Mel said, for people of faith. And really encourage you to check that out and learn more. Contact Mel, he knows a lot about it, or contact me. We're of course glad to help in any way possible. Karen, would you be interested in speaking a little bit to the idea that we got at the last meeting about a bulletin that could be presented to the? I'll let you talk about it. I'm going to butcher the got to get the wording right. Go ahead. But if you could talk real quick about that, be great.
I'd love to, but actually the person who authored the trifold, Mark Retchen, you are here with us. Can you share?
Oh, perfect.
Hi, my name is Reverend Mark Breeken. I'm an ordained elder in the Rio, Texas Conference and an Earth Keeper and in charge of the Rio, Texas care team. Given the season of disaffiliation in our conference, it was advised by the bishop that model resolutions, or basically any resolutions, should be kept to a minimum this year. However, to keep momentum going, I took the resolution, and now I have both the green team and the land formation. Kathy has that as well. And I took those and placed those into a trifold flyer. They're edited down for space, but they are in Word doc. You can change up the wording however best fits. At the back of the tri-doc, I have information for our annual conference. The ones I posted are blank so that you can put that information there for you, but it's a way to basically plant the seeds so that if you can't do it this year, maybe next year, people will have already read the verbiage, understand what's going forward, and then you can use that as a catapult. It's also going to be mentioned on a conference report, and therefore it gets in the annual conference minutes.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Mark. Very much appreciated. So I want to move into our more structured Q&A. So if you have a question or a comment, observation, go ahead and raise your hand. All right. I see there is a huge, oh, there we go. Okay, Mel, I was going to say there's a stampede to the raised hand feature. Go ahead, Mel.
Just to remind everyone that for most annual conferences, April 1st is the deadline for submitting resolutions. And so we have a short time frame to work within. And so you can do this individually, or it could be in conjunction with your church and society in your annual conference, or with United Women in Faith, all of whom are working together on the work of the creation justice movement.
And to echo that, if you are not able to submit a resolution this year, and I know that West Ohio, for example, their submission date was the 1st of March, so that's passed for them, although they did submit some resolutions. But if you're not able to this year, we want to encourage you to still use those for education purposes and advocacy purposes, so that again, like Richenda said, you're priming the pump. So we're appreciative for folks like Mark who've put together the trifold, take the resolutions that are available and maybe have them at your table in some fashion, whatever works for you all as you're at your annual conference, to be able to alert people to this is important work. And if you're not able to do a resolution this year, you're likely to be doing one next year.
Wonderful, Karen. Yes, absolutely. Maybe you've got, maybe you're a clergy person and you're struggling to figure out how to do this in a way that you're sure will include your lay folk, or maybe it's the other way around. And I hear both these scenarios where there's a group of lay folk, but they're kind of disappointed that their pastor isn't more supportive. So those things can happen both directions. And there may be a sense that it's not supported by the conference, and that maybe this is a risky thing to do, to submit an annual resolution. Like, are you going to be looked at askance in the annual conference rooms, or will that be embraced, and will people shake your hand and say thank you so much for doing this? I want to offer up courage. I heard from a wonderful United Methodist who tried to put something together and didn't really happen in her church. And I asked if I could quote her. She said, "I should speak up. I am afraid." So if you are feeling this, Earthkeepers is a great place to reach out for courage. Jonathan Brake, Kim Richmond, Karen McAlfish, Kathy Eberhardt, Mel Caraway, as we've heard how engaged she is. And these are all leaders in our denomination who we're so happy to reach out and offer courage and a hand and a listening ear if you're uncertain but really feel called to do this. And yes, a whole new curriculum, Wake Up World. And there's actually a few curriculum items that have made it to the Cokesbury, and more on the way. We have a worship series for post-Eastertide that you can maybe start a dialogue with your pastor around. And all those things are going to be available in the United Methodist Creation Justice Movement website. There's just so much there. This is just this blooming, that like that dogwood tree that Kim's church planted in their churchyard. It is growing, it is blooming. Maybe it's a little bit crooked because it's hard to do something new, but we're working on it. It's just beautiful. So, okay, go ahead, Kim. And like I say, if you're not, yes, go ahead, Kim.
Sure. I just wanted to make the point about something that I heard during this conversation. I mentioned that I'm not experienced at all in the resolution field. And that is the fact that there is value, even if you present the resolution and it does not pass, because it gets the issue out there and it gets people talking about it. And so if you do have a short deadline, which we are working against a short deadline too, we've set our deadline on March 30th, and we're just sending out the request for support after this webinar when I get a chance to do the email. If you don't feel that you can build enough support, you can at least get that out, and it gets it in front of, that's one of the few times you have that opportunity to get it in front of the entire conference. One thing, when we run Creation Care events that we advertise, you often find people attending who already care about creation care. And so this is an opportunity to at least have everyone hear the term and know that people are interested in it. So just that word of encouragement, don't worry, I can't build enough support. Give it a try.
Go ahead, Pat.
So yeah, I was thinking exactly the same thing. This is not about winning or losing. This is about being faithful to our call as Christians to care for God's creation. That's simply what it is. And so get the resolutions out there, get them in front of people, and don't worry about the rest, because you're being faithful. You're doing what you need to be doing in order to be a disciple of Jesus Christ. So I was thinking exactly the same thing, Kim.
For those of you who may not know Reverend Pat Watkins, he has been a beacon of light, a change maker, and a groundbreaker in the creation justice movement within the denomination of the United Methodist Church. And I could not be more glad I just love how his heart comes to this and how he talks about that. So it's just marvelous. Thank you. All right. So the one of the things we kind of planned into doing this is to see if you're thinking about, to hear you about what you're thinking of. What is your why? Why are you wanting to do this work? And maybe something we talked about here helps you or calls to you, in which case you can share that. But we're just wanting to ask you, can you drop your why into the chat? And a why is something like why you can't just walk away, right? So there's the meal in front of you. If you're not hungry, you can just walk away, right? But if you're hungry, you're gonna like, oh, I'm not going anywhere till that's finished. I'm gonna eat some of that good bread that my sister Kim is making, and I'm gonna break it open, and it's gonna steam in the whole room, and it's gonna feel like a sacrament, and I'm gonna eat it. So that can be a good why. It doesn't have to be I'm terrified of the apocalypse to come, which I know for some of us is an answer to that question. So there's some really good things ahead of us that can be our why as well. Children and grandchildren. I think that is absolutely something that motivates many of us. This recognition that things are going to be really different for them, and how different depends on what we do right now. As Jonathan said, that new report is out, and if we're not paying attention, we're in big trouble. Okay, so Jonathan says he has to leave early. Jonathan, go ahead.
I just really thank you all for being involved in this and helping to move us forward. It's so exciting to see that we're not alone as we do this work.
Absolutely. Travel mercies and many, many blessings to you, sir. All right. Okay, so 7 generations and a couple of book recommendations, Braiding Sweetgrass and a Sand County Almanac. Catherine Hayhoe, Saving Us. Absolutely. There's a lot of folks inspired by that book as well. If you have a book recommendation, looks like this is a good opportunity to do that. Garbage Theology. I want to read that one. I have not read that one yet. But what an engaging title, right? Just because of the title, I want to check that book out. Gregory writes, The Cosmos Cries Out for Our Devotion and Healing Actions. And I also agree completely about Braiding Sweetgrass. Yes, I really, that is definitely one of those big thumbs ups, hearing the voices that maybe we haven't heard before. Another book recommendation, Nature's Best Hope by Douglas Ptolemy. Wonderful, absolutely. So the next thing would be if you have an action plan at all, if you have an idea about what you want to do next, to share that. Sometimes sharing it, making it black and white, helps us to to really claim that and know that you have support, and you do not have to be afraid of those next steps. In fact, you can rejoice in those next steps, as the psalm says, that we return to the land singing, right? Singing, rejoicing, dancing. So I have asked, I want to give it last chance for Kim or Karen, if you have any last thing that you want to say, and then I'm going to ask Reverend Pat to pray us out. So Kim and Karen, is there anything you want to say before we go?
Just do the good work and help each other out. Stay connected.
Amen.
And the only thing I would offer is that I highly encourage anybody who's not already joined the United Methodist Creation Justice Movement. It is just wonderful to share with others who feel the passion that we do about God's creation.
Oh my gosh, amen and amen. All right, so with that then, I'm going to invite Reverend Pat Watkins to say a prayer and pray us out. Go ahead, Pat.
Okay, thanks. So I'm going to read a prayer. This prayer comes from a prayer book, Celtic prayer book from Iona that was put together by Philip Newell. So it's likely a very, very, very old prayer. So may we pray. Bless to us, O God, our souls that come from on high. Bless to us, O God, our bodies that are of earth. Bless to us, O God, each thing that our eye sees, each sound that our ears hear. Bless to us, O God, each scent that goes to our nostrils, each taste that goes to our lips, each ray that guides our way. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Thank you, Pat. All right. Many blessings to everyone.